Hi, I'm Dr. Nadia, founder of the Doyen Agency and host of the Sales Culture Unfiltered podcast. I'm so excited about today's episode and our guest, Meghan Henning. Meagan is the founder and CEO of the Arche Advisory Group, and she has spent over 20 years in sales roles, including senior leadership and various corporations, including Fortune 100 companies. Today, we're going to dive into this concept of always on and its impact to not only sales members, but to sales organizations and their cultures. This was such a juicy conversation, and trust me, it's a conversation you don't want to miss. Tune in. Welcome to Sales Culture Unfiltered, the podcast where we get real about what actually makes or breaks high-performing sales teams. I'm your host, Dr. Nadia Y. Brown, a sales culture and communication architect, and I work with sales leaders to engineer high-impact teams that hit their numbers without burning out or breaking down. On this show, we dive into unfiltered conversations with sales leaders, industry experts, and high-performing teams about what it really takes to drive revenue, retain talent, and build a winning sales culture. If you're tired of surface-level advice and want the strategies, challenges, and hard-won wins that actually matter, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. Welcome to another episode of Sales Culture Unfiltered, and I hope you have your seatbelts on because today's conversation is going to be so good. But before I get ahead of myself, welcome Megan to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I've been
Absolutely.
looking forward to this for a long time.
Yeah, we had some conversations prior, so I've had a sneak peek into what our conversation would be like today. But before we dive in, Megan, let's give the listeners a little bit of background of kind of what has led you to where you are today. One of the things is which you've just launched your own company. So tell us a little bit about that journey and what brought you to where you are today.
Yeah, thank you. Again, thank you for having me. I mean, you are like the things that you're doing are incredibly powerful. And for all of the listeners, if this is your first time listening to Dr. Brown, Nadia is out there in the world just connecting with people, especially women entrepreneurs or, people who are seeking entrepreneurship. And you're really bringing to light a lot of the hard topics that we don't often, number one, get time to talk about. And then number two, we often don't have kind of the right language to be able to talk about some of these things. And
True.
so I really appreciate you having me on. And our conversation today, I think, is really, really well timed.
Hmm.
Not only because, it means a lot to me personally based on my most recent journey, but I know that it means a lot to other people that I've spoken to. I've been doing a lot of work with other organizations, in particular sales organizations, and we're seeing a lot of common through lines right now in our sales culture. So I'm
Hmm.
really excited about the conversation today. As you said, I mean, I just started my business. I think it's been about 6, 7 months maybe since February of this
Congratulations.
year. Thank you. And the journey of entrepreneurship for me didn't start when I started the business. It
Hmm.
definitely started long before that. And I would say that I really had embarked on, truly, if I'm being honest with myself and all of you, an 18-month journey. And I'd actually call it a process
Yeah.
of figuring out, kind of taking stock of where I was in my career, listening to myself, listening to my family members and what they were telling me and what they were seeing take hold of my life, and really embarking on this path of just saying I need to stop everything that I'm doing. And I need to make a big change. I don't know what that change was. I didn't know what that change was going to be. I didn't know if I was going to leave corporate America. I didn't know if I was going to start a business. I didn't know if I was just going to quit everything for a while, which I had the luxury to do, to be honest, at that time. Not everybody has that luxury to do that,
Mhm.
but I could have taken some time off. And really, the reason why I started kind of trying to take stock of my life was because I was dealing with highly, highly toxic, cyclical burnout.
Mhm.
Burnout. Yeah. After
Mhm.
20 years of being in sales and working for large corporations, including Fortune 100 companies, I had gotten to the point where I was in this kind of middle to higher up leadership position. And with that comes a lot of responsibilities, but I was also finding myself as a mother of a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and trying to be a wife. And at the time, I wasn't being a good friend, I wasn't being a good family member, daughter, any of those things, because I was really only focusing on the one area of my life, which was work. And
Wow.
this burnout for me wasn't just a moment in time. It wasn't just this week I'm feeling burnt out, or I've been burnt out for a couple of months. I was operating on full burnout for multiple years, probably 2 to 3 years. Yeah.
Wow. And what would you say contributed to that? Because you didn't just wake up one day, like you said, burned out. And this was a elongated, like 2 to 3 years is a long time to be sledging through feeling burnout. Like, what do you feel were some of the contributing factors to that?
Multiple things, right? And I know a lot of people are burnt out. A lot of people tell me that they're burnt out. Most of the time, I find that the folks who are usually the most burnt out, I guess if you were to rank the amount of burnout, if there was a scale, the folks that really feel it are those kind of type A, really natural born leaders,
Mm-hmm.
and those that are never complacent with where they're at. They're always seeking to not only achieve more in kind of that career sense or that professional sense, but they're also seeking to better themselves. So
Yeah.
on all fronts, they're trying to conquer this idea of being the best versions of themselves outside of work, and they're also trying to be the best versions of themselves inside of work and accomplish all multiple goals all at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I'm
I
sure you can
resemble
relate
that
to that.
remark.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so you have these type A personalities who are always naturally trying to better themselves. Then you take them and you put them in some of these different sales cultures that
Yeah.
we've had a chance to talk about. And that sometimes isn't necessarily the recipe for greatness that you think it would be. So tell us a little
Yeah.
bit, Megan, from your experience, like what really happened?
Happened. Yeah.
Yeah, what really happened behind the scenes, if you will, that
Yeah. And it took me a
contributed
long time to
to this?
figure it out because I was
Yeah.
doing a lot of self-blame. At
Hmm.
the time that I started on what again I call like this 18-month journey or process, I was in the midst of trying to figure out there was a little bit of woe is me. This is like, why is this happening to me? Why do I feel so anxious all the time? Why do I feel so exhausted all of the time? It must be me. It must be my decision to have had children. It must be my decision to take on a leadership responsibility at a large organization.
Hmm.
And so what I did was I just started trying to take as much time out of every day to just kind of sit with myself and focus on something other than work and the task at hand.
Oh, that's so
And
good.
because at the time I wasn't taking lunch breaks, let's face it, there was no lunch, there was no time for me during the day. But I started at least going for like a 10-minute walk. And during that time, I would listen to any podcast that I could get my hands on.
Hmm.
I love books too, and I was grabbing books at that time, but I mostly was listening to podcasts. I mean,
Yeah.
shout out to Jay Shetty, Mel Robbins, Rachel Rogers, right?
Right?
Gwyneth and the Goop, anything that was about, reclaiming finding your passion, your true calling, your true passion. And
Yeah,
in particular, if it pertained to women in leadership or entrepreneurship, I was listening to it.
I
And
love
and
it.
what started as 10 minutes a day became 20 minutes a day. And then I was taking my full lunch hours because I knew that the work I was doing was so important to get me out of the place that I found myself in,
Yes.
you know.
Yes.
And so I through that process I realized that it was burnout, and I realized that the burnout was really quite simple. It was due
Mm.
to this what I think most of us have heard of at this point, this idea of an always on sales culture,
Oh my gosh.
or just like hectic to the extreme, just always
Chaos.
activity based, always on. Yeah. And it seems simple, and we talk
Mhm.
about it, but I don't think that there's enough of us peeling back the layers of this culture, because it is a true movement. It's a true culture that has wrapped its arms around so many of the sales organizations that I've worked with over the years.
Yes.
And and it needs to be stopped and course corrected. And
Please and
and there's
thank
not
you.
enough of us examining kind of the themes that go on behind the walls of a sales organization right now.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things, there were a couple stories that you shared with me in some of our previous conversations, Megan, around, I know from personal experience what that has looked like for me, but share what that has actually looked like for you,
Yeah.
being both a wife and a mom and a leader in a sales organization and now having to deal with this always on culture.
Yeah, well, it's crippling. It's crippling.
I agree.
So if anybody's listening and you feel like this is resonating with you, I'll just tell you that the feeling can be something like I'm stuck. I I feel like I don't know which direction to move in. You feel like that every day is a little bit soul crushing because you're putting in so much effort, but you don't feel like you're actually moving in the right direction. And so, this journey that I was on, and over those 18 to 24 months, I really was focusing on reclaiming my personality, reclaiming who I was inside of corporate because I had actually lost some of my confidence even inside of corporate due to
Mhm.
burnout and corporate toxicity and reclaiming my ability to actually find joy in life. Like this is a real thing that can happen if you are living in a burnout state for an extended period of time. You start to actually lose yourself. And I was hearing that from not only did I know it clearly, but my family knew that. And my spouse was trying to tell me every day that I just was a little bit less of who I was when we met, actually a lot
Mhm.
less, if I'm being
Mhm.
honest. And my kids knew it. They were
Mhm.
absorbing my stress and anxiety and this just feeling of constant defeat. Even though on paper, even though, inside of the business, people probably thought I was thriving and excelling and doing all of the right things, I didn't feel that way.
Wow.
And so I should really pause here. And if anybody listening feels this way today, I want you to know that it doesn't have to be that way. There is a real world and a real life outside of burnout inside of a corporation. I
Yes.
am proof of that, I promise. And you will find joy again, and you will smile again, and you'll find your intention outside of where you find yourself today. So it is possible. I'm proof of that.
Yes.
But, for our conversation today, I really, started thinking back. And when we peel back the layers of an always on culture, we didn't just get here by chance.
No.
Companies, leadership teams, and the sales team didn't just start acting like this out of nowhere. And I think for my generation and for me in particular, I've lived through a few different sales cultures, really. I have always been in sales since I went to school for sales. I
Oh,
wanted to be a
wow.
lawyer. I wanted to be a lawyer, but my mom said I wouldn't like the paperwork. So off to business school I went.
Thanks, Mom.
Thanks, Mom. But it served me well. She had good advice. But I actually was in a sales and business administration program and where
Wow.
you would do mock pitches and everything. I've been in sales as long as I can remember. And I had internships with real sales experience through internships in college. Where I was learning, the tactics of cold calling and lead gen and marketing and all of the things that kind of carry you throughout a sales career. So I learned that the basics and the fundamentals really early on in practice. So
Mhm.
I've been in sales for 20 years. And again, like I told you, shared with you, I've worked for some really, really large sales organizations.
Mhm.
And when I started, I would say, and for anybody who's kind of a millennial in this generation, right, we started with the boys club. It was, and unfortunately still today, I'd say there's still this, right? The boys club.
Mhm.
And if you were going to go into sales, you were going to be a female working in a male dominated industry or field. And for me, it was industry and field. So I kind of had the double-edged sword. But when
Same.
I, but to be honest with you, I knew that going into it. I
Yeah.
knew, and it was kind of part of the challenge, right? It was kind of exciting. Like,
Mhm.
can I have a voice and can I be successful in sales when I'm the only female in the room?
Right.
And what I found is I wasn't usually I was the only female, but I was also the youngest person
Ooh.
or the youngest female in a room. And so I sold in the boys club. It's the land of deals are going to get made on a golf course. They're going to get done at the bar after hours. So you better be willing to work hard and stay late.
Mm-hmm.
And in my case, deals were done at really and really inappropriate masculine places like strip clubs. I'm gonna throw
Wow.
that in there. I worked in Vegas and I was distributing chemicals to casinos, and my team was male. And yeah, during the day, I kid you not, I was in my 20s and I would find myself in the back room of a strip club. And I would have to, so I thought I had to, in order to fit in and have a seat at the table, I was going to smoke a cigar, drink scotch, and talk with the men.
Wow.
That was my experience. And
Wow.
if you can picture it, like little Megan,
I'm trying to picture this. You in the
yeah,
smoky room with smoking a cigar, drinking scotch.
I did
Okay,
it. I mean,
got it.
when you think about somebody who went all in on this career and wanted to succeed, it was me. I was going to be there. I was going to have a seat at the table no matter what that meant. So that boys club mentality was we're going to do business in suits and over drinks and business with a handshake. Shake my
Mm-hmm.
hand, we're going to do business. It was all relationship based.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that to fit in. And what I took away at that time was you just work hard and hopefully they'll let you into the room when those deals are happening. And that's
Wow.
what I thought.
Can I pause you right there because
Yeah.
you said a whole lot. Whole lot. But one of the things that I want us to talk about a little more or just kind of bring our attention
Yeah.
to is let you in the room where the deals are being made.
Yeah. It's powerful, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I don't think we talk enough about some of the barriers
Mhm.
that we may face, especially as women. Like you said, not only being in a male dominant industry and field, like it can be intimidating, but there are some things that happen that we don't really bring voice to. So
Right.
the fact that you use those words, they let you in the room where the deals are being made
Mhm.
speaks volumes.
Yeah, I felt like, I'm uncomfortable in this environment. And that was one
Hmm.
example. There are so many
Hmm.
where I did things and went places. There's one thing about getting stretched out of your comfort zone for the good of personal growth. There's a
Right.
whole nother thing about an inappropriate expectation that you should follow suit, fall in line, and participate in things that make you uncomfortable if
Yes.
you want, again, a seat at the table or to be taken seriously.
Yes.
And it should have been the opposite, honestly. I I
Hmm.
I look back and my 24-year-old self would have tried to have created more healthy boundaries. I'm
Hmm.
not so sure that those boundaries would have been respected, to be honest,
Right.
at the time.
Right. Or they may have been respected, but would you have advanced as far in your career?
Right.
You stuck to those boundaries. So you do feel
I
like there's
agree.
that either or.
I agree. And
Yeah.
and I remember two huge executives coming to visit my territory because my territory was excelling. I was increasing sales. I think growth was unprecedented in that marketplace. And they went out and proceeded to get completely inebriated, and I had to be their, designated driver and get them back to their hotel and put up with all their shenanigans. And I think that's when I knew that I had to make a choice to really start a different path for myself in sales and in this career
Mhm.
if I wanted to take myself seriously and if I
Yeah.
wanted to kind of get myself out of that situation. Lucky for me, kind of the next big, I would say, sales culture or culture wave came into play for women in particular back in I think it was 2014, 2015
Hmm.
when the book that we all probably know about, Girl Boss, by
Yep. I recall
Sophia
that one.
Sophia Amoruso, the creator of Nasty Gal, and she that book was such a barrier breaker for women in sales and in business,
Hmm.
and those who were thinking that they might want to be entrepreneurs at some point in their lives. I mean, that book was all about embracing your femininity inside of the workplace,
Mm-hmm.
speaking up and not being afraid to claim what's yours and to take risk. And I think that that was such a bold, I mean, that was, I think record-breaking sales, and it was such a bold move because finally somebody gave women permission to be women in
Yes.
this climate.
Mm-hmm.
When I think about both of those cultures, though, there's one through line,
Mm-hmm.
and that is if you work hard, you'll get far.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever get far means, right? Whatever
Right.
that means. Yeah, it hasn't really gotten me all that far. But, the idea of work, 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 work. So, whether you're in a boys' club or you want to sell like a man, or you want to embrace your femininity at times and really prove to women that you can be powerful in your own right, you can do all of those things.
Yeah.
Or you might be confused. You might be somewhere in the middle and thinking, I don't know who to be, right? And that's, I
So
think,
good.
how I felt. There were times where I
Mm-hmm.
knew I needed to stop talking and be the man, act like a man in that situation to get the job done. And oftentimes it works if you act, bring out your masculine side. There are
Yep.
other times, like in leadership meetings and conventions, and when I'm standing up with, other female entrepreneurs, and, I want to bring out my femininity and talk about women and empowerment. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a really powerful thing. But we're always stuck somewhere in the middle of pulsing on and pulsing back and then bringing that back in, reining that
Yep.
back in, knowing when to speak up and when to just shut up. And it
Mm-hmm.
becomes exhausting. I mean, that in and of itself
Very much
is
so.
burnout. That is exhausting. It
Yes.
just is. And so I think where most of us have kind of defaulted and landed at is okay, we just got to work hard.
Mm-hmm.
As long as we work hard, somebody's going to appreciate that. And whether I was too, womanly that day or too manly
Right.
that day or like too masculine
It'll
that day
all
or
work
whoever I
itself out.
was, it doesn't matter because they know I'm a hard worker and it's going to get me far.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so we arrive at this always on work, work, work. As long as I work, I will
Mm-hmm.
get somewhere type of
Mm-hmm.
mentality. And I think that's how we ended up where we're at with this new wave of
Gosh.
of sales culture.
It's so funny because, yes, I can relate to all of that and the exhaustion and the burnout and like you said, the stop, start all over the place. I don't even know who I am today.
Yeah.
One thing I want to introduce to this conversation, I definitely want us to talk about is when things shift when you become a mom.
Yeah.
And I too have had the experience of being in sales and being in these cultures, whether sales or even just male dominant industries. Like my most of my career has been spent somewhere in a male dominant industry, whether I was in sales or not. I was that before becoming a mom. And then to shift and becoming a mom and embracing all of what comes with that. Like, what was that transition like for you to journey into motherhood while being in an always on culture? Like, what was that like for you?
Mm-hmm. I love that question. I love it because this idea of always on is even more amplified if you're a woman, and it's
Mhm.
even more heightened from there if you're a mother.
Yes.
And to answer your question, I was going through that transition, that motherhood transition. I was already a senior leader in a business, um, and had my first child, and so I was going through that transition personally. I will tell you, I don't think I ever went through that transition professionally.
Wow.
I never allowed myself to. I tried to hide that side of me at work,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I never allowed myself to change how I interacted. Even more so, I probably try to force my old patterns, my old kind of personality. There's one
Yep.
thing we all know that motherhood can make you, it brings out some different sides of you, and I think for the better. But
Mm-hmm.
if I'm being really honest, I think I tried to hide all of the emotions, all of the personality changes, anything that I was gaining from motherhood, I was trying to hide from work because I thought it was going to be a negative, and I would
Mm-hmm.
get docked points for any time I brought up that I had a child, that somebody was going to be thinking, oh, that I'm a mom first. And I
Mm-hmm.
am a mom first.
Right.
But in corporate culture and in sales organizations, you're not allowed to be. You have to be business first. You have to be company loyal first. And so I really never allowed myself to transition. And I think if anything, I was trying to be inhuman, more of a like I'm a robot. Yes, I have a brand new baby at home, but you'll never know it because I'm
Never know
here
it.
and I'm on time and I've got my coffee. And you should, I mean, if somebody were to have turned the camera on in my house, it would have been complete chaos,
Complete
right?
chaos.
Because we're all human and we all have things that we go through.
Yeah.
I pretended like nothing existed other than work.
Wow.
And I think one of the things that can happen, especially if you're a leader and you have a team looking at you, it does promote the sense of being inhuman, more like you're a robot, right?
Hmm.
Somehow you are there, you're showing up. And it actually creates the narrative for your team that they need to follow suit and that they're not
Hmm.
allowed to have a real life outside of the workplace. And that is one of the themes that can start a really long line, a spiral of toxicity in the workplace.
Yes. Huge toxicity. And you've
Yeah.
talked quite a bit about working in toxic sales culture. So are you ready to just kind of dive
Yeah.
into those three main things that you've kind of
Yeah.
outlined that
Yeah.
contribute to
Yeah.
that?
So I
Okay.
think,
All right.
yes. Okay. So I think this is really interesting. And I'm really, again, I told you I was so excited to chat with you about this today because I know that you and I are both passionate about these subjects.
Yes.
And when we, again, like I said, nobody's really peeling. Well, I'm sure there are some people out there, but I haven't pulled up that podcast yet. Hopefully, this is the one where we're diving into this always on culture. What does it really mean? And how does the train get on that course? Because once it's on that course and you're developing that sales culture and within your organization, it's really hard to course correct and to
Yeah.
stop that train. And actually, that's why I chose to leave the company I was with. When I had embarked on my journey to really figure out where I was at and what I was going to do to get myself out of burnout, I
Yeah.
didn't know if at the end of that kind of that self-exploration period, I would stay with the company I wanted to, or I would leave and do my own thing, like I said, or I told you this, or stay home and for a while and just kind of take a break. But what I realized is that again, for me, for where I was at, it was impossible for me to stop the train on that track that it was heading
Wow.
down and to
Yeah.
get back on the right footing within the organization I was currently with. And so I
Hmm.
really think that there are three things that happen. And the first to bring us to a culture that's a toxic, always on kind of mentality. And the first one I will say is this myth that activity equals productivity.
Mm.
Have you heard that before?
Yes.
Activity equals productivity. Uh, we'll dive into that in a minute. The second theme, and this is something that maybe folks have either heard of or maybe it's a new way of framing it, but I think there's this weaponization going on of what it means to have a service culture.
Yes.
Okay. And the third thing is this notion of distrust by default.
Oh my gosh.
So sales leaders or leadership who is distrusting the
Hmm.
sales team and those that they hired, spent a lot
Hmm.
of hard work to hire.
Hmm.
So I think those three things really help or contribute to building this always on culture. And by the way, that's not a culture. That is chaos. That is a sales organization
Chaos.
full of chaos. And so I think it'd be fun to break down those three notions today.
Oh my gosh, yes. It's so funny because my husband and I, not talking about sales culture, but we were just literally talking about that whole activity equal productivity,
Yeah.
even for students, for kiddos, because we were talking
Yes.
about
Right.
just
So
things
true.
for our daughter and some things, some changes we may make with her education. But from a place of we're looking at who she is as an individual, right? And how she shows up, this type of support she needs, but also the world that once she becomes an adult, what that world looks like. And so it's just interesting that that topic came up, but I think it's very relevant even to this conversation, right? Like I think a lot of our one of our previous podcast guests, Carrie Kinsey, talked about,
Oh,
and she talks a lot about the generations in leadership and in the corporate workspace right now, and how there needs to be this whole leadership reframe. And I think that that is part of what we're seeing when you talk about activity equaling productivity. Not only do you have multiple generations, but I think how we're approaching leadership or sales and how we do business in corporate needs to shift
Yeah.
because the approach is antiquated. I don't know if it was ever really helpful. It obviously worked to a degree, but now we're in a different time and
Yeah.
space. And
Totally agree.
so, yeah, so I just want you to dive in some more, not to derail us too much, but it
Yeah,
was just
no,
like,
I
oh
mean,
my gosh.
and I agree. I totally agree, and I love that. I think you're absolutely right. This framing of activity equals productivity does shift through into our lives with our families, our kids' lives, all of the events that we have them in. I think that's a really smart way to frame it. So within sales teams in particular, I think that high activity or being held accountable to high activity rates absolutely leads us to burnout,
Hmm.
sloppy execution, and short-term wins that get us nowhere as an
Yeah.
organization,
Hmm.
right? And we end up losing trust with our employees if we're again holding them accountable to these fabricated quotas or KPIs that they have to try to hit. And we also lose trust with our best customers. Because you have to remember, any sales leader has to remember on the other end of the activity, the phone call, the email, the text, there's a customer, usually our
Yep.
best customers, because we're trying to get money out of them.
Hmm.
And they get tired of being hounded. So this activity, right, there's something about in sales, it's sales is all about timing and knowing when to lean in and when to take a step back. And again, if we
Yes.
hire the right people, they should know that technique and know when to step in and out do some more outreach or whatever it's going to take to get the job done. I think that, how many of us have been had days where it's just back to back meetings, back to back. There's no
Yes.
lunch. There's no time to, I'm going to say it. I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm going to say it. There's no time to even go to the bathroom. Are you
Right.
thinking like, if I go to the bathroom, is somebody going to ping me or is somebody going
Yes.
to worse call me and ask me where I'm at? It's been 6 hours of calls. I have to just take a break, stand up, walk around. Or I've been working with some organizations where the leadership is really, really keen on tracking activities
Hmm.
to the highest extent, which in my mind doesn't necessarily make it quality activity. Let's take it back to the basics. We all know that there's a difference between activity and revenue generating activity.
Yep.
What I think we're struggling with is, does your team understand what those revenue generating activities are? And
That's,
that's where we typically have the problem. Not them understanding the notion of it, them not knowing where to start. And I'll
yeah.
tell you what, if that's happening, that tells me maybe one of two things or both. It means that you've got a leader who is running a team who is not taking the time to sit with their people and help them frame up a sound business plan, growth plan, revenue plan, whatever it might be. They're either too lazy to do it because they think they're too busy, or they don't know how in the hell their person's going to actually achieve their quota this year or how they're going to get there. And it's
Right.
sometimes it's both of those things,
Hmm.
right? And so I think, call it what you want, but this idea of being over booked and overworked, it does not mean that we're going to have valuable sales
Nope.
and that the team overall is going to be productive. I have seen so many sales teams work themselves into the ground
Hmm.
chasing sales, but they were
Hmm.
meaningless. It was a short blip in the ROI, but oftentimes mistakes happen and you have to go back through those sales and you end up much worse, in a much worse position than you would have been had you slowed down and not just been cramming, engaging in this high grind culture.
Yeah. Can I
You
ask
know,
you a question around that,
yeah.
Megan? Because one of the things that you talked about was a leader who either is too lazy or isn't sure how to help their team members. And I love it because I
Was
see
it
it.
harsh? Maybe it's too
No,
harsh,
it's
but
good. It's harsh. Sometimes we need harsh, right?
yeah,
Um, to help their team really frame out or figure out how to actually achieve the goals.
yeah,
And one of the things that I see is that people don't even realize sometimes they don't feel that it's a necessity.
Mm,
because they feel that they should just know how
mhm.
to do this.
Yeah, I love that. I've
And
heard that
so,
too. Hmm.
yeah, right? Like I hired you, your experience, you should just know. I just give you a brochure and a list, and off you go. Go make us millions. And
Yeah,
Godspeed,
it's not the
right?
case. Listen, we all know how much actually goes into a business plan, to a growth plan.
Yeah.
If it were that easy, it would take me, 1 hour instead of 1 month to create an annual forecast for a sales organization, right?
Mm-hmm.
It takes time and it takes more than one set of eyes and more than one person to come up with, the plan. And
Yes.
I could dive into all, what that compiles, but it's many things. And
Mhm.
oftentimes you have a new salesperson who is coming to this organization and every organization has specific ways of doing things. And then
Exactly.
before you know it, you're not just expecting them to go and get sales done, you're expecting them to do it in a certain fashion. And that
Mm-hmm.
is unfair. That is unfair. And it's not going to help that person grow into the salesperson with their own flavor, their own way of doing things. You've got to give them the confidence and the tools in doing that. Help them set forth on the right foot. Join the first few meetings with them, spend time with them. One of the worst things we can do is hire the right person and then get lazy about it and not go meet with them in the market, not spend the time because we are air quote too busy.
Yeah.
There is nothing more better than that a leader could spend their time on than developing that person in the first 90 days in market, period.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is going to set the tone and the trajectory for how well that person is going to thrive or not thrive within your organization or get
Mm-hmm.
burnt out, right? It's not just our top performers. It could be your person who's trying to be your top performer, but is so tired because everything they try isn't working because we didn't spend enough time early on to really give them the guidance and the quick tools. I mean, I'll give you an example. I I have had folks on my team after 8 months in the role. They send you an email, you get that email, and it's like, hey, sorry to have to ask this, right? They're apologizing ahead of time or they're
Mm-hmm.
chatting you, right? And it's, I can't believe I'm asking you this. Don't think I'm dumb or however they frame it.
Yep.
But do we have a sheet or a tool or something that tells us about this or that I can give to the client? And how many times I've thought, well, yeah, of course we do. You should be using this tool every single day.
Yes.
The people are that person is afraid to ask that question, so they sit and they wait 8 months before asking it, and that
Mm-hmm.
ends up being one of the few things that can really propel them and stop this cycle of them not closing deals to all
Yes.
of a sudden they're making
They're
waves.
a rock star.
And so it's really something as simple as that. We have to give our people the resources and the tools. And another aspect of this, activity equals productivity, is that it creates a culture of what I like to call theatric hustle, performative theatric hustle.
I
Like,
am totally
let
borrowing that term.
yeah, let's make this real. Okay,
Yes.
so listeners, anybody, have you ever had that person call you and they're like, they're 5 minutes late to a call, maybe 7 minutes, maybe more, and it's, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm late. I was back to back calls since 6 a.m. and because they want you to know that they've been working since 6. And
Mm-hmm.
and I got this and this to do, and I'm just so busy and I'm back to back to back to back to back. Have you ever gotten that call and you're thinking, like, okay, can we just get down to the root of why we're
Yes. Can we
meeting?
get
You've
down to
already
business?
wasted my time and we have something important we need to cover. Or I've had the Monday sales call. Oh, everybody loves a Monday sales call. Who doesn't love, you First of all, can we change that? Like, let's have like a Tuesday sales call. Why does it
Please
have to
and
be
thank you.
Monday? Because you're already having the Sunday scaries, thinking about Monday and the routine sales call. Let's talk about what we're going to do during the week. That's
Mm-hmm.
a whole nother podcast. But but really, I've had these. You get on the Monday meeting, and you have that person, Ryan. Let's call him. Let's just make up a name. And he gets on. He says, and I say, Ryan, how was your weekend? He says, well. I didn't really have much of a weekend because I worked 4 hours on Saturday and I made 2 calls on Sunday and got that deal done. And you're thinking, like, okay, I just sincerely wanted to know how your weekend was.
Right.
Um, But and you know what? I'll admit I have done similar things before. Like
Same,
because you go
guilty.
into Monday and I've been so freaking resentful that I had to
Hmm.
work my ass off over the weekend, right? And I probably shouldn't swear on here, but
You're
you can cut
fine.
that out. But my point is, like, how annoying is that? But here's what we do, and this is the mistake we make. We reward this type of behavior.
Yeah, we do.
From the top down, we reward it. How many calls have I been on where somebody, the leader will say, "Oh, so and so's green light was on his chat at 9 p.m. on Friday. So I know he must be going to get that deal done this week because he's been working overtime." We
Hmm.
reward that type of behavior, and that has to stop. It
Yeah.
has to stop, period. There's nothing wrong. Listen, I am all about hustling. I wouldn't be where I am today without hustle. But there's a way to do it and a time to do it. We do not need to expect our teams to be on every weekend and every
Hmm.
time after hours. In fact, it should be the opposite.
Yes.
We need to create healthy barriers, healthy boundaries, and enforce that people do what they need to do to be ready to come to work when it's time to work.
Yes.
And trust me and believe, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but in sales in particular, salespeople know if they need to get on after hours to do something because it's time sensitive, very critical. They're going to do it,
Hmm.
right? But we don't need to be monitoring that behavior and then calling it out to set an example. It doesn't
Or
set an example.
encouraging.
It crushes people. It beats them down so they feel like they have to now, let's just say, have a green light on their chat all the time. And then they go out and they buy one of those jiggler monitor, those things that, jiggles, and then it makes them look like they're online all the time. We don't need to be doing this to our
No,
people,
no.
period.
Save your money. Oh my gosh. So I think this is a great segue because into number two, which is the weaponization of an in-service
Yeah.
culture, right? Because you do see this a lot and you hear, sales is service and we're here to serve and all the things. But tell us a little bit about the other side of that.
Yeah, this is where it gets a little tricky, right? And so there are a lot of companies who consider themselves to be a service company. I think every company kind of has somewhat of this culture, but there are some companies that outwardly try to portray this, and they claim themselves as a service company. Like I think Trader Joe's is a service company, Zappos is a service company. And there are two prongs to consider when you're thinking about a company that is a service company. And one is the outward facing external mindset of the customer is always first and is always right. And listen, I wholeheartedly agree with that. I think we can all, get on the same page there. That's pretty easy. Of course. Of course that's true and that's how you want to lead. Internally though, the orientation of that narrative when supported internally means supportive leadership, really helping your team, showing empathy and sympathy with your team,
Hmm.
and providing an all hands on deck culture within your team.
Oh, yes.
And on paper, this all makes sense.
Hmm.
It's like, of course that makes sense. That's all good. That's all well and good. But in practice, what I have seen is that that narrative gets twisted. And
Mm.
all of a sudden, what being in service to your team means is being it doesn't become in service. It takes it to a point of servitude.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah.
Let's break that down. So if I'm going to be supportive with my team, that means being a supportive leader, providing tools, providing coaching, resources, and ample one-on-one time.
Hmm.
What that shouldn't mean is that I am expected in a middle or higher management role or leadership role to do all their growth, like do all of the work for them. Not only do my job, but build out their plans, call their customers, get on every client call, and execute all hours of the day.
Hmm.
That is not the case.
No.
That is overextension, and it means that not only am I doing my role, I'm doing three other people's roles, or maybe more than that. And that's burnout, right? That's how you get to
Yes.
burnout. And this all hands on deck mentality. I love that one, and I use it in a positive framework with most of my with actually with all of my leadership positions because I am all about checking your ego at the door as a leader
Yeah.
and not being above doing the real work. If your
Mm-hmm.
team needs help, if you are rushing and it's an all hands on deck, time frame to get something done, I am all about jumping into the trenches with your team in order to really help out. Don't be above doing the work. But what I'm not about is the all hands on deck when it's not necessary,
Right.
when there's not an emergency, when you're
Mm-hmm.
not going through some sort of major transition within the organization. You know, since when does like it become in service mean that you have to answer emails at 3 a.m. or that you are going to miss doctor's appointments so that you can be in every meeting, or that you miss a concert that your kid has been practicing for months, you know? So when the definition of service, means that you are working so hard at the expense of yourself, your
Yeah.
family, right? Then I think we have totally missed the plot of what being in service means. It means that we have transitioned that whole idea and we are weaponizing it and we are driving servitude and loyalty within our organization, specifically by making our leaders act as such. And it has totally contributed to this always on culture. And when
Mm-hmm.
you put that and you pair that with high activity equals productivity, the notion of that, then you are going to completely risk losing your most loyal, your
Mm-hmm.
top performing people. They are going to walk from
They are
burnout.
going to leave.
Yeah.
Yes. Which
Yeah.
we saw with you, right? You're
Which is so
a
well.
walking example of that, right? You're like, I'd
Yeah.
rather take this leap into entrepreneurship versus having to deal with this all the time. And that's a pretty huge leap.
Yeah, it is. It is. And so I think like, I hope that that resonates with people, right? Because this idea of company loyalty and being in service is a really big thing that I see with organizations these days.
Yeah.
And it's putting you to the test and you're risking your health and who you are as a person at the altar of this manufactured notion of company loyalty. And it's
Mm-hmm.
all manufactured. It's made
Yeah.
up. And I'll give you an example. I mean, I think, talking about answering emails at 3 a.m. and, missing concerts and, whatever it is, whatever that looks like in your life, it's this idea of is true for both men and women, but it is even more amplified for women in my mind, and especially mothers,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, it's almost like, and in my experience, it was testing, you're being tested for your loyalty at all times.
Yeah.
Who's willing to stay on late? Who's willing to hop on the weekends? And you are tallied. You're tallied for those
For
things.
sure.
And in my case, and when I became a mother, like we talked about, I tried to hide that transition from my work life.
Mm-hmm.
But there became a time where my kids were getting a little bit older and they were full-time daycare kids. I, never saw them during the day. But I did try to implement some sort of healthy boundary. And I remember going to my leader at the time and saying, I just need 2 hours a day out. I need to tap out from the hours between, I think it was 6 to 8 p.m. so that I can feed my kids, bathe my kids, and get them ready for bed. I don't even need to put them to bed. Dad can do that, but I just need
Mm-hmm.
those 2 hours. And now that I look back at that, to think about how ludicrous that is, that you are only asking for 2 hours a
Hours
day. I
with
mean,
your baby.
I even went as far, Nadia, as to offer my time afterwards. Self-proclaim, I will be online after the hours of 8 o'clock, after the hour of 8 o'clock. So if you need me for anything, I'll be here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What is up with that, first of all?
Oh my
And
gosh,
it
yes.
probably was, about 2 weeks into that notion that lo and behold, I started getting requests for Zoom meeting invites at 7 p.m. We got to get on. We've got to talk about this customer. We've got to talk about this project.
Seriously.
We've got to work through this issue. We have a revenue loss. We've got to figure that out, whatever it was. And I'll tell you that there's this crippling factor. I've used that word in our conversation today because you feel like I've already missed
So much.
I missed that activity on the weekend. I missed my son's, picnic. I missed whatever it was. I'll be damned if I missed this dumb 7 p.m. meeting so that they have now something to use against me. And all of a
Hmm.
sudden, their narrative that I'm a mother and I'm probably not as dedicated as the next person
Yep.
would be true.
Hmm.
And that is not sustainable. You cannot operate under that scrutiny or that false reality for only so long. You can't maintain it. It's not maintainable. And I do remember getting on the phone one night at 7 p.m. and lo and behold, my 3-year-old walked in to the background. Probably, I don't know what he needed, who knows. And I remember, being so mad at my husband because how dare he let the toddler walk into the room. And I was staring through the screen and I could see leadership and their faces, right? And
Hmm.
it was just this message of sternness, like, okay, well, we're in the middle of something. We really can't have any interruptions right now. And I knew that, a little bit of my piggy bank that I had worked so hard, that loyalty
Yep.
bank that I had
That's
worked
just
so
a
hard,
deduction.
it's a deduction. And it goes back to what I was saying about trying to be robotic in a sense and not human. Life was not allowed to happen because I was a leader and I had to be, showing at all times where my loyalty belonged, and that was to the organization.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yes, been there, done that. Have the things where I'm like, no, don't come in. Like, because how my
Yeah.
office is set up, or same, being agitated with my husband because he couldn't control the little one running around. And he's like, seriously, you've been locked in our office for hours.
And I don't like to hear that, but I like to hear it because I at least am not alone,
You
right?
are
Like
not
how many
alone.
moms out there have been like, I'll tell you, honestly, I used to hide in the laundry room for like an hour on a call. The president of the company calls. I'm in the laundry room thinking maybe the kids won't find me in here. I've got to take this call.
Yep.
Um, and I used to send my family, I'm going to be honest, I used to send my family on our planned vacations early without me and say, I have to put a few more hours in. I will meet you guys there. And when I would get there, I would have all that anxiety that I was, to be honest, probably walking into divorce papers because I'm going,
Hmm.
who's going to stay with me? You know, but I was the one taking the burden and the brunt of all of that. Not only was I stressed out at my day job, trying to do all of the things, but then
Hmm.
I was upset and sad that I was missing time with my family.
Hmm.
I was in distress because I knew that my husband was not thrilled with the way that our marriage was going and would, at times blame me or we'd get into little arguments about things and how I was spending my time. But you have to go through all of that mental load
Yes.
and you also have to keep performing through it. That's the
Yep.
thing. You had to still excel in the job and hit your numbers or whatever it was. Still had to try to be a good mom and get all of the things arranged and still take care of the household and do all those things. You're still doing all that work. Where was there any time for me or anybody else in all of this? No wonder this all leads to burnout because
Yes.
you have no time to even sit with yourself and give yourself an ounce of energy.
Of grace.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Oh my gosh. So the last one is, oh my, I have talked about this one, the lack of trust, but this whole idea of distrust by
Yeah.
default for your leadership. Let's talk about, let's dive into this
Oh
because
my goodness. Okay,
trust
so
all
yeah.
around in sales.
So for this one, right, this and I've coined it this distrust by default. It's like,
Hmm.
where did this ever take place, right? We spend all of this time hiring what we think is the right person
Hmm.
for the role. And if we do our job well, then we've hired the right person for the role. So why do we not trust them to do their job? Why are we like forcing them to have this always on grind mentality where, like we talked about earlier, we're tracking their activities. Are they greenlit on their chat? When we called them, were they in the car? Where were they going? Or were they home? When we put on a last minute Zoom meeting, were they right in front of their computer ready to go? Or weren't they? And, here's the thing, truth be told, usually I've had that happen to me before. Like I had to, I'm always in front of who's ever had this happen? You're in front of your desk for 8 hours. And then all of a sudden you get a call from school and you got to run over and drop something off, or you've got to get to the dry cleaners because you have a really important meeting next week. I have to get that blazer to the
Yes,
dry cleaners,
this
right?
needs to
So you
happen
run out, and what happens? Nobody's called you all day, but guess who calls you when you run out?
immediately.
Your boss, right? Or your leader. And you're going, oh my God, how does this happen? So you answer, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm in the car, and yep, I just have to go to the dry cleaners. And so now all of a sudden, again, what we've talked about, then it's like uh, the narrative has been started,
Mm-hmm.
right? The
Yep.
narrative is now, oh, this person we might have a problem with because they're in the car a lot. They run a lot of errands during the workday. Or
Seriously.
or they've got kids that, if your kid's sick and you have to pick them up from school last minute, it becomes, oh, well, they have kids. And so I don't think they work as many hours or that many hours.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a ridiculous thing that kind of can spiral or have that spiral effect. But ultimately, I don't care if my team is listen, if you have to take an hour out of your day because you have a doctor's appointment, do that. I
Oh,
want you to do that.
yes.
If something really needs to get done, I trust that you're going to do it because I hired the right person, and doubly, two things you have in your favor is you're a salesperson. And
Mm-hmm.
if there's anything I know to be true, absolutely, I'm 100% confident in this, maybe 500% confident in this. Put whatever factor you want on it. Salespeople are motivated by success. They're
Mm-hmm.
motivated by closing deals.
Mm-hmm.
Not only are they motivated by that, but they love accolades and they want
Yeah.
praise from that. And even moreover, oh, by the way, how dare we forget that salespeople like to make money? And
Mm-hmm.
they can only do that by closing the sale. So, what I'm a firm believer in is yes, know kind of obviously know what's going on with your team, but trust your people to know when to overextend. If that call on a Saturday to a client is really going to get the job done, trust that they've been building that relationship and they
Yep.
know that they need to do that to get it done. If it's not going to make a difference, trust them that they know that and that that activity can wait till Monday, right? We have to start encouraging. We can't just tell people that we want them to be independent.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to the beginning where we say, we can't just hire people and then say, okay, just fly, just do your thing, and hopefully you're
Good
successful.
luck.
But then hound them and really track them in a micro level
Yep.
and make sure, keep this pressure all of the time. Salespeople don't operate like that. What that does to a salesperson is it really has the opposite effect, and it will not lead to productivity. It leads to people getting burnt out,
Yep.
frustrated, resentful, and them ultimately leaving the organization or costing you even more money,
Yes.
you know?
Yes. Wow. First of all, Megan, I
Mhm.
could talk to you all day, because we share a lot of similar philosophies and experiences. Um, and just some of the things that we're seeing and the work that we're doing, right, to help turn this thing around in an organizations. And all the things that you've shared with us today around the drawbacks of the always on culture
Yeah.
and everything that it impacts, because it doesn't just impact your performance at work, it impacts how you show up at home in your personal life, it impacts your health, it has far-reaching impacts. As we bring this to a close, what are some parting words of wisdom to someone who is listening to us right now and they're like, oh shoot, like
Yeah.
that is
There's a
me.
lot. There's a lot. Listen, whether if there are a couple of things, it's this, right? If you find yourself in a situation, first of all, where you're feeling burnt out and you're in a culture where maybe not all of these things resonated with you, but some of them,
Hmm.
just know that they're the grass might just be greener on the other side, to be honest. If you find yourself in this situation, there's a different path for you. Take the time, ask yourself the hard questions of what do you want next? It doesn't have
Hmm.
to be forever. It needs to be something that can get you landed in a more solid ground so that you aren't feeling the way that you're feeling today. So that's number one. The other thing is that there's a path forward, and all of us as leaders, whether we're leading in our own company, men and women leaders, if you're leading in your own company or within your respective organization, there is a way to foster a new path forward for
Yeah.
our sales professionals and our sales team. And that is by building a culture where activity does not equal productivity, right? That equals performative hustle and
Hmm.
chaos. Um, and really, you can start doing this right away by hiring, working hard to hire that right person, but then spending time with them and giving them the tools necessary to really build a sound plan forward, right? A plan that you can both get behind and
Hmm.
that they actually understand what it is that lay out the clear expectations for them.
Yeah.
The other thing that you can do as a leader really early on is be talking to our people about non-negotiables. Everybody
Hmm.
has a life. I want everybody on my team to have some sort of like, tell me where they're at in their life. How can we make this a good relationship, both personally and professionally? I
Yes.
don't just want to hear about your professional growth goals. I want to hear where you're at personally. You don't have to give me all of the details, right?
Right.
But if there's something like, hey, I'm just going to tell you, if you have an emergency and you call me at 7 p.m., I'm going to be getting my kids ready for bed. I need to know those things and I need to
Hmm.
respect those things because ultimately those are going to be the buttons that if I cross those boundaries, I will create resentful top
Hmm.
performers. And that's the
Yes.
worst thing to have.
Yes.
And then also, being in service means truly supporting your team, not sacrificing your health, your family, or anything else at, the altar of manufactured loyalty.
Mm.
Companies can use the word being in service all day long. Stay true to the meaning of that.
Right.
Let's not get it twisted into this toxicity, this toxic expectation that we are now, operating in servitude to our leader. That is not going to, fly. That's not going to create the best outcomes for any organization.
Right.
And then lastly, trust your people. Trust them until they give you a really serious reason to not trust them,
Yes.
right? And then get rid of those people. Let's part ways early on because it's not the right fit. But ultimately, trust your people because,
Hmm.
and especially in a sales organization, they want to make money, they want to succeed, and there's no single person in the organization that wants that more than they do.
Right.
Yeah.
So good. Thank
Yeah.
you, Megan.
Oh my gosh, you're welcome. Thank you for
Thank you
having
for
me.
being
I hope
willing.
this sparks some ideas and I hope people, this really gets the dialogue going and thinking about how do we break down this culture
Yes.
and try to reframe it so that we
Hmm.
can be, the spark a new path forward and a new sales culture for the next generation to operate within. They shouldn't be, beholden to the boys club, the girl boss, or this always on culture. It's got to be a hybrid, something that we can really, get our arms around and
Yeah,
truly put forward.
absolutely. This was so good. I think all of us are going to have to go back and listen to it a couple times. There were so many gems.
Yeah.
But thank you again for being here. And thank you all for listening and tuning in to another episode of Sales Culture Unfiltered. We'll see you again soon. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
That's a wrap on today's episode of Sales Culture Unfiltered. But the conversation doesn't end here. If something sparked your interest today, connect with me on LinkedIn or visit our website at thedoyenagency.com to explore how we're helping sales teams build cultures that last. And if you found this episode valuable, don't keep it to yourself. Hit subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a fellow sales leader. See you next time.